Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Niche Cast, coming at you on a glorious Thursday morning. And today we are going to talk about Team New Zealand taking the America's Cup to Barcelona. Woohoo! Fuck that. We are definitely not talking about that. We're here to talk about stuff we want to talk about in Aotearoa sporting glory of a different variety, not good or bad, just a different variety. You know the vibe. You listen to the Niche Cast podcasts, videos, and if you're reading all the glorious Aotearoa sporting content on our website, theniche-case.com, you know what we're here for. You know what we do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and we are here for another podcast today, coming at you with some football. Fresh off the All Whites enjoying a nice victory in their Oceanic final qualifier game. Also got some Football Ferns, got some Wellington Phoenix, and plenty of rugby league. Cricket is on the back burner for this podcast. We'll talk about, we've got the Women's World Cup still happening, semi-finals today, final coming up. And of course, the Black Caps are playing their ODI series against Netherlands. There also is Plunket Shield cricket going down as well. So we will do deeper dives into the cricket stuff once, if the summer ever ends. I don't know if the summer's going to end, wildcard, but leaves are falling from the tree, and that signals that cricket will come to an end soon enough. And when that happens, we'll be here with our typical deep dives into Aotearoa cricketing happenings. But for now, today, this week, we're going to be diving into lots of football and lots of rugby league. Early in the week on our Monday, we do our Monday Patreon podcast, where we just come at you on a Monday morning reacting to the weekend sporting action, drop a couple of clips from that podcast on our YouTube page as well, and a full banger podcast is there for the Patreon whānau. So if you are a member of the Patreon whānau, make sure you check in that out every Monday afternoon. Extra podcast for you. And if you do enjoy the Niche Case mahi, but easy mahi, support the Niche Case via Patreon. Patreon.com/our Niche Case, EL Niche Case. Best way to support us, straight up the guts. Shout out to the Patreon whānau. Every Monday and Friday, we also deliver an email banger, which is just pure Niche Case nuggets. Mined out of the Aotearoa sporting landscape, put through. I watch plenty of Gold Rush here, Wildcard, so I know a fuckload about gold. You get it out of the dirt, you put it through the washing machine, get the concentrate, then you put that on the shaker board, then you pan it down a bit further, then you got gold. That's generally what we do. We take all the dirt and we find the Kiwi sporting gold. But the Monday and Friday email just has different types of nuggets. The nuggets that don't necessarily appear on our website, but current eventy, up to date, and just bits and pieces from the Aotearoa sporting landscape, as well as everything else we do. All the links to our deeper dives on the website are there. All the podcasts get put into the email as well. And then, of course, just some Aotearoa sporting nuggets. So sign up via thenichecase.substack.com, enter your email address in, subscribe, and then every Monday and Friday evening, bang, Niche Case nuggets that aren't going to make you rich, but might enrich in your Aotearoa sporting mind. And of course, we always write about Aotearoa sport on our website, theniche-case.com. Latest Diary of a Warriors Fan is live, so check that out if you can read good. There's the Football Ferns squad breakdown wildcard, as well as regular All Whites yarns in the written format as well, Flying Kiwis. And the old mate Shane Warne had his memorial service, so there is a deep dive into Shane Warne's spinning exploits against Aotearoa and in Aotearoa via the wildcard as well. So just head on over to the niche-case.com, check in, you'll find something you'll enjoy reading, hopefully. And of course, we do cover plenty of music. There will be the monthly jukebox where we recap some of our favorite albums from the past month. That will be live in the coming days as well. So If you like reading, if you can read good, head on over to thaniche-case.com. Otherwise, open your taringas and have a little listen. We always start our podcast Wildcard with a dose of mindfulness. Serve it up on a platter and let me bang it in from the edge of the box.
Just like Andre De Jong cutting one back to Matty Garbutt this morning. This is a doozy I got today. This is from Zen Flesh and Zen Bones. Koan number 31. Everything is best. When Bunzan was walking through a market, he overheard a conversation between a butcher and his customer. "Give me the best piece of meat you have," said the customer. "Everything in my shop is the best," replied the butcher. "You cannot find here any piece of meat that is not the best." At these words, Bunzan became enlightened. Ding, ding, ding.
So everything is the best. Is that the nugget we're taking away from that? Everything is the best? Everything can be the best?
I'm not sure, because they leave these things, they're more like riddles than answers, those kind of things. Like, they really want you to sit there and think about them for a while. And I only looked at that 5 minutes before we started recording. So, but I think he's, I think he's trying to get at this idea of maybe a bit of perception. If you see everything as the best, then suddenly, like, there's no, I don't know, competition between buyer and seller. There's no feeling like you've been duped. There's like I guess there's an honoring of the animal that became that meat. There's a feeling of the interconnectedness of everything once more, because if everything is connected, everything's the same, which means you can't have something that's the best and something that's the worst, because they're kind of the same thing ultimately. And yeah, little bit of all of that in the pot, stir it up, and dip in your spoon and have a sip of some mindfulness taste testing. I think
it's also quite easy to feel grateful for something that is the best. It just,
yes.
If you view something as the best, like, this is the best day of my life, the only thing you can then feel is gratitude for having the best day, or having the best bed, or having the best garden, or having the best leg that you have in the world. Whatever it is that you want to view as the best and frame as the best, because that's all it is, how you frame it yourself. I believe if you frame it as the best, it's quite easy to then access gratitude with that as well. And if you're expressing gratitude, well, fuck, you're halfway there. Like, you're winning the battle.
Yeah. And that's simply a matter of perspective in this case, and probably in every case, isn't it? It's just like choosing to see it as the best. I guess also there's something about, like, I don't know, a certain like pride from the butcher's perspective in that story, and what he does of being like, no, everything is the best. Like, I put all my best effort into, I don't cut corners. I don't treat this like, this lamb shank worse than this like sirloin steak or anything. Everything is on the same level. Everything is as good as each other. There's like a professional pride in there, and also like getting out what you put in. And then, but yeah, I think as much as anything, that idea, like that little riddle, is to teach you about just like keeping that positive mindset, and that everything is what you make of it and how you perceive it. Like, perception becomes reality, and if you believe it's the best meat that you're going to buy, then it is the best, because that's what you've wished into existence, and all them good things.
The difference between the best and worst is just your mind. Like,
yeah, it might be different for someone else too.
Yeah,
so
it's
yeah,
just so funny how easy it is, and how powerful we are as human beings, because it's us that controls that perception. Wildcard Thursday morning. You're the All Whites aficionado. Some would say the greatest All Whites thinker in Aotearoa. In the same way, I'd put myself in certain categories along that line as well, because we are the best. Our mahi is the best as well. We are the best.
Perception is reality.
And that's just, we're out here living it up. So, All Whites, take us through just how you're feeling right now, Thursday morning. I don't know who the All Whites played, because I was busy in my best life, doing my best work. You can't be distracted with these things. If you're doing your best mahi, you got to be solely focused on your best mahi. So that is to say, I don't really know who the All Whites were playing, or I know they won, and I know they won fairly convincing. So break it down, just like how you're feeling Thursday morning after the All Whites won the Oceanic phase of this qualification process. And I imagine they'll now play a Central American, South American team, whatever it is. But how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good about what I've said, not only this morning, but throughout this these couple of weeks of qualifiers, I think. So the All Whites played the Solomon Islands this morning. In the final of the Oceania qualifiers for a place in that intercontinental playoff that you mentioned against the fourth placed Central American team. We'll come back around to that idea soon, but first they had to get through the Solomon Islands. Solomon Islands had won all three of their games. Only two of them counted because the Cook Islands withdrew after losing 2-0 to the Solomons in their first game. They had some COVID cases, so did Vanuatu, who didn't end up playing at all, although did recover in time to play a friendly game against Fiji outside of qualifying while the teams were still there in Qatar. And Roy Krishna scored 2 goals to become Fiji's all-time leading goal scorer in that game. So it's not just Chris Wood breaking those records in Qatar at the moment for Oceania nations. Solomon Islands are good. Like, they got Rafael Leai, this like 18-year-old striking phenom, probably like the best talent coming out of the islands at the moment. He spent a year in the Wellington Phoenix Academy, but because he wasn't I think he went to Scots College, I think, while he was there, and while he was, because there's some like FIFA rule about you can't move for footballing reasons. It has to be like life reasons, and he'd obviously gone on a scholarship to play football. So he couldn't play for the Phoenix reserve team in competitive fixtures until he turned 18. It's the same problem that they had with Calvin Harris when he was there, Hong Kong national, I think. He then went to university in the States and got drafted like top 3 in the MLS and is playing for, I think, Cincinnati in the MLS these days and doing pretty well. But so Rafael Leao was in the same issue, and then the second year he just didn't go back. Like, I'm not sure what the story was. I'm not sure what the thing. But he just didn't, like, they had his plane tickets booked for him, and he never got on the flight. He just stayed in the Solomon Islands, and but like he's gone places. Like, he's a very good player, and he's 18 now, so he can go sign professionally somewhere. He's a great player. He scored about, I think, 4 goals in the tournament, but 1 didn't count because it was in that Cook Islands game. They got like Michael Lealifa and a few of these other guys. Elvin who's another top, scored 2 goals in the semi-final against Papua New Guinea. So this was a good, strong team, and more than any other team that the All Whites played at this tournament, the Solomons actually took it to them. Like, they tried to play positive attacking football against them. It just so happened that it didn't help that the Solomons also had a couple of defenders and COVID protocols, so weren't able to play this game, and obvious disruptions with everyone else having to do testing and checking for quarantines and stuff leading up to that as well. So that was not ideal for them. But I sort of don't know that it would have mattered when they had just such one blinding weakness. It's really rare that you see a football game where it's decided so emphatically on one single phase of the game. But All White set pieces were just unstoppable. Like, the Solomons defenders couldn't win a header. Their goalkeeper didn't know how to deal with the ball in the air. And just the quality of deliveries from guys like Joe Bell in particular, but like there's a cross from Tim Payne setting up a Chris Wood header. And Bell actually scored directly from a corner at one point. Keeper came out and missed it, and it just went in. He set up another corner kick that Bill Tuiloma headed in. Tuiloma also headed in from a Francis de Vries free kick in the second half. It was just like there's 4 goals right there, all from crosses. 3 of them headers, 1 of them directly in from the corner kick. Like, it's just that whatever else happened, and there's plenty else going on in the game, but whatever else happened, that aspect of the game, just always set piece deliveries. The Tim Payne cross was from open play, but similar area, similar situation, aerial stuff, just completely defined this game. And then they did score late on. That Andre De Jong set up Matty Garber, that goal that I mentioned earlier. So stoppage time, it took them to score a goal with their feet, other than the Joe Bell corner kick direct thing, which doesn't really count the same. But nice emphatic 5-0 victory. Like a good solid win from the All Whites, who looked really good. They did it without Libby Kikache and Winston Reid, who were rested because they're both on yellow cards, which meant if they got another one, they would have missed the Intercontinental playoff. The theme of the I bristle at that for two reasons. One, I don't think if I was coach, I would have taken the risk of not playing two of your best players. I think I would have tried to play them, get the game out of the way, and then sub them off early. And just trust them not to get yellow cards or whatever. But and also I just think it's weird that you can serve a suspension in a different phase of qualifying for one picked up in an earlier phase. I think that's a little bit odd. But it is the same for Costa Rica. So that's, something to consider as well. But yeah, like where am I going with this? Just a good solid win. They rested those two dudes. The theme, yeah, well, here we go. The theme of not only this whole All Whites campaign, but also several of our recent podcasts has been relying on depth and like just having your depth tested, depth of the squad, other guys from outside the starting team stepping up, delivering. That's been, as I say, the theme of our podcast for a couple of weeks. It's been the theme of this All Whites tour. They had to do the first couple of games. They had to play with like a largely A-League based team, as other guys weren't available until the international window opened, sort of like filtering that through along the way. A couple of different phases of squads here. Mixing minutes, 29 different players across 5 games took the field out of 30. Just guts to Matty Gould, who's the backup goalkeeper, who was the only one who didn't get out in the park at any point. But everyone else got some minutes. Danny Hay, like specifically making sure he could rest some of his more important guys for these later stages. Like making the most of those A-League guys when they were around and getting good results. They won every single game, only conceded 1 goal, hardly looked like conceding in basically any of these games. Like fantastic defensive performance throughout the whole thing. And as I say, like depth was the story of this thing. And ultimately, when it came to the final, what are you going to do? Kikache is on a yellow, Reid's on a yellow. We'll just rest them and trust the depth to do their job, and they did, and then some. And thus, the All Whites are now 90 minutes away from potentially making their 3rd ever World Cup. They'll be back in Qatar in, I think it's June, play that 4th placed North/Central American team, which Costa Rica are playing USA in their last game like an hour after we finished recording or something like that. So before the podcast goes live, and they are almost certain to finish 4th, Costa Rica are, unless they win like 6-0 or something against America, or they win and Mexico get absolutely thrashed by El Salvador, who are out of contention altogether. So that's not going to happen. We'll be playing Costa Rica. And that one will be, in June, back in Qatar, and Libby Kikache and Winston Reid will be available because they won't be suspended. Hopefully Ryan Thomas will be back fit by then. Sarpreet Singh should be fit by then. A few other guys, like some of those A-League guys, might be able to play the full thing because that'll probably be, if not after the A-League season, then very close to the end. It might clash with playoffs, actually, which could be something to think about. But I'll have to check how that goes, how that lines up. But yeah, they're in a good place, and it's Costa Rica versus New Zealand for a place in the World Cup. One of the last couple spots, I think. I think there's only, we might be down to, once they finish these, we might be down to the last 2 spots there to be gained, and it'll be New Zealand against Costa Rica for 1, and it'll be Australia against I think a South American team for the other final spot. So it's getting frisky. We're almost there. We almost know our 32 World Cup teams, and All Whites are still in the mix.
You mentioned a magical number of 29 players used, and like I keep having this random thought idea. Like we keep hearing how like junior sports numbers are dwindling, and it's doom and gloom for junior sport, and like all these sporting organizations need more people playing. They need more money. They need more. Yet all these sports that we cover are experiencing the greatest depth they've ever had. And we've discussed this in every sport, really, like Kiwi NRL, Black Caps, women's football, women's cricket, women's rugby league. Like every sport that we cover is exploding with quality depth. But I want to keep this focused on, that's just a wider thought to keep, because I think there is a bit of a, I don't know what it is. It does feel a bit false though, because we're experiencing one thing, but then the governing bodies and the governing organizations seem to be experiencing something different. And I'm not sure what it is. To me, it just smells like they just want more money. They just want more fee-paying people to join their club and thus make more money. But I don't know. Move on. I am curious because I've thrown out numbers. Like the Black Caps have a swimming pool of depth featuring 25 lads, 30 lads. I don't need you to tell me like which players are missing and whether they'll be factors or whether they are international players. I just want you. So you mentioned 29. I'm going to roll through some numbers and I want you to interrupt me when it feels like a stretch. When it feels like I'm too far into my Aotearoa sporting optimism and I'm reaching for some international caliber all whites players that aren't international caliber, right? So you said 29 players played in this Oceanic qualifying thing. So that tells me we have 29 lads worthy of international football selection from Aotearoa. Little old Aotearoa, always underpopulated, always under-resourced, but yet we still fuck shit up at the international level. And you mentioned one bloke, Mr. Gould, didn't play. So 29 lads played. Mr. Gould, he was the 30th lad in the squad. You also dropped some other names that weren't there. So if I take this to 35, is that a stretch or is that like just fair?
35 is easy. That's not even stretching.
So, 35, easy mahi. 40 international, 40 lads capable of playing international football for Aotearoa. Is that a stretch or is that fair?
This is where we're starting to feel the hamstrings a little bit. Not quite touching the toes yet, but you're definitely feeling it. It does depend a little bit once we get to that point on who we're playing. Like for Oceania games, yeah, we can keep going. For the Intercontinental playoff, it gets a little when you're going all out, everyone available, best possible team. You start to notice the like tiers of quality that are in the squad, but we're talking about Oceania playoffs. So for Oceania playoffs, yeah, I think we could probably reach a bit further.
There's no game. We're just talking in your mind. So you felt a stretch heading into that 40 region.
Yeah, well, I mean,
for any game, we're just like, okay, the all whites swimming pool of depth. Can we get 40 blokes in there? Now we're getting a bit of a stretch. Is that correct?
Yeah,
yeah. So we'll put it in the 35 to 40 bracket, which I think is bloody fantastic. There are at least 35 lads from Aotearoa capable of dabbling in international footy. And of course, some of them, as you said, are going to be like first 11 starters against a high quality opponent. Some of them are going to be squad members for an Oceanic qualifying series. Like there are tiers within that group of 35. But the thing here is that, like all these other sports, you only need 11 on the fucking park, and we've got, 35. These are uncharted territories for many of these Aotearoa sporting teams.
Yeah, and like I'd have to check what the numbers of players, because Danny Hay must be up to about 10 or 11 games now since he's been in charge. I think 11 off the top of my head. And I would imagine that if you took his total player pool of guys who have been used by him since he was coach, I think it would be above 40. I think we'd be looking at like 45-ish range. Some of those guys he might not ever call up again. I don't know. But others, I mean, for example, this tour didn't have Ryan Thomas, didn't have Sarpreet Singh, didn't have Michael Boxall, didn't have, Marco Rojas would be in a 23. I don't know about an 11, but certainly a 23. But those other three are definitely in contention to start. And Singh and Thomas at fully fit, fully committed, are no doubt as starters. Like those are two of our 5 best footballers on like right now. it's decent, and that's without even getting into guys like Elliot Collier or Nick Sanev, Ollie White, Sammy Sutts for the Phoenix, a few of those other like Phoenix guys who are pushing through, Max Mata, guys like that. We could go deep.
That's 40. Like that just feels like a solid 40 right there, which again, highly impressive. Take a similar scenario to the Football Ferns squad. So now we've actually because I think that depth stuff gets a bit funkier when you're discussing squad selection. So break it down for the Football Ferns, because there is a Aussie chick. This is the weird thing. Like, I don't know. I think a lot about rugby league eligibility as well. There are dudes who are born and raised in Australia who want to represent Aotearoa. And then there are dudes and women like Batil Vedi Walsh, was born and raised in Taipa up north. And she wants to represent New South Wales. She's representing Australia in rugby league. Like, it's interesting. It's like fascinating. It's intriguing. It's confusing. But this just tells the story of like, you can't predict who will be eligible. Like, you just have to go with their personal decision, because my experience in rugby league is that guys like Bailey Simonson, Remus Smith, born and raised in Australia, want to represent Aotearoa Kiwis. And then there are players born and raised in Aotearoa who want to represent New South Wales, Queensland, and Australia. It makes no sense, and that's all good, because it's purely up to the individual. And now we apply that. Like, there are many cases on the All White side as well, but now we take that into the Football Ferns, because this new Football Ferns squad to play Australia features a chick who was born and raised in Australia and was kind of on the road to representing Australia. Now she's going to be making she's in the squad. She might make her debut against Australia. So break that down, and then we might get into some similar numeric breakdown depth stuff with the Football Ferns as well, because same vibes there.
Similar vibes. Not quite the same, because I don't think there's quite as much, like, if the Wellington Phoenix were 15 years old or whatever it is the men's team is, probably more than that at this point, I'm not sure, then it would be a deeper pool. But that's still a very new thing, so it's only just like freshly added another 10 or 11 players. But
like, we're celebrating here.
It's certainly expand. Like, it's a year ago, not the same thing. A year ago, we're probably talking like 25 players. Now we're probably at like 35 or something like that. So that's cool. The eligibility thing really is weird. Like, it's just to reiterate your point, like, Gianni Stensness has like born and raised in Australia, has a Kiwi one parent, I can't remember which one, moves to play for the Wellington Phoenix, declares himself that he wants to represent Aotearoa. He plays a year, I think, for the Phoenix, actually breaks into their first team, looks really good, then moves back to Central Coast Mariners, but continues to play for New Zealand at youth grade, plays at the Olympics, is actually outstanding at the Olympics, goes and signs alongside to play alongside Joe Bell at Viking in Norway when Bell was still there, and then decides he'd actually rather play for Australia, which probably means that he was tapped on the shoulder and said, like, well, I'll tell you what, we like what we've seen at the Socceroos headquarters here, and if you can, come along. And you can't blame a dude who spent the bulk of his life there, but like he did go out of his way to make like a serious commitment to New Zealand, but then didn't. Like, it's an odd one. But at the same time, Joey Champness went the other way. Born in New Zealand, but raised in Australia, had represented, I think, Australia at youth grades, and he decided he wanted to play for New Zealand after all, and now is in this all whites squad. And I should actually that's an interesting thing to think about, because the FIFA rules are that you can't, once you turn 21, I think it is, they refined it a bit recently. It used to be a bit sloppier. I think it's once you've turned 21 and you've represented the team you're currently committed to in an official fixture, you can't change anymore. Up until that age, you're allowed to go back if you played like fewer than 3 or 4 games or whatever it is. But But once you're like 21 or older and you've played an official fixture of some description, so not a friendly, but like a World Cup qualifier or a regional tournament or something, then you can't switch eligibility anymore. Interesting note on that is that these World Cup qualifiers were the first official fixtures the All Whites have played since the last World Cup cycle, which means that anyone who debuted since then could still have, they wouldn't have, I don't think, any of these guys, but it was still an option that, for example, Joe Bell to England, Libby Kikache to Italy, Matt Garbett for England, Nico Kerwin for Italy, et cetera, Nando Pijneke in Netherlands, like I could go through a bunch of these, Michael Veld in Netherlands, like there are a bunch of guys, actually Michael Veld wasn't on this tour, but a bunch of guys who are now officially locked in All Whites. They were always going to be. It was just a matter of formalities, but it's come to think of it, as we're talking about this, that's something that's now happened. Nice and formalized, set in stone, concrete. Ellie Green's situation. Ellie Green's situation. She has a Kiwi mother. I knew who Ellie Green was because she's played a few seasons for Sydney FC now, and she's a good solid left back. I had absolutely no clue she was eligible to play for New Zealand, and no one else seems to either, except Tom Samani must have, because it was mentioned that he had spoken to her once upon a time, saying like a couple of years ago, saying, "Well, would you be interested in switching allegiances?" And at that point, she had played Australian youth internationals and still wanted to play for the Matildas. And I don't think anyone's kidding themselves in saying like that wasn't her that wasn't her first choice. Like she wanted to represent Australia, didn't get the opportunity. She has a fallback option. Fair enough. She's eligible for both. She did say like how she's sort of supported a lot of New Zealand teams, and when you do have a Kiwi mother, it's a close connection. It's not like the Nathan Feen Grandma Gate thing back in the day for the Kiwis, like that's a close connection. That's someone you've grown up your whole life and raised you who's from a certain country. You're gonna feel that, right? We just didn't know it. Just didn't know that, but it was a thing from the outside looking in. So she's apparently just not going to get a go for the Australians, or she's sick of waiting around to get a thing when there's an opportunity for New Zealand right away. So she's switched allegiances, not eligible to play in these Aussie games, I don't think, unless they get the paperwork done nice and quickly. But they sort of hinted that maybe like they're not doing it straight away because this is sort of like the final trial, like the last interview before you get the job kind of thing, like from both directions as well. Like if she enjoys the environment, if the coach likes what she sees up close working with her directly in trainings and stuff, then sweet as, rubber stamp it, or steam ahead. But there is still a little out option in case neither of them enjoy, or one side doesn't enjoy what's going on. But I would imagine that's just a matter of that's just another one of them formalities. Once you've announced it, you're pretty committed to it at that point. It'd be hard to backtrack on that. And yeah, it's just another good addition of depth to the team. She's not better than Ali Riley, so she's not going to be this like first choice left back. It's not a game changing difference for the Football Ferns, but it's a nice solid addition. A young player, she's about like 23 or something like that. Has ambitions of moving to Europe and playing professionally, perhaps as soon as now. The A-League season's done, might be something that happens straight away. And so therefore, big room to improve. Good left foot, good crosser of the ball, good energy, like very good passer from what I watched of her, like focusing specifically in the A-League Grand Final on the weekend. So, good player to add into the player pool. And it's just another example of how like depth grows from unexpected ways sometimes. Like people just come out of the blue. I mean, people wouldn't have been thinking of Alex Grieve in the All Whites, for example, as someone who would be 6 months ago as someone who would be like scoring goals in official qualifiers and playing an important role for the national team so soon. But there you go. Like it just, depth comes on pretty quick sometimes. It happens in unexpected ways,
And as various teams have found out, can work in the other way as well. Like
it can, it certainly can.
Off the face of the earth. So the Football Ferns are playing Australia when?
Next Monday and Tuesday, next Friday and Tuesday, I think it is. I'm not 100% on that.
So there's a whole week to discuss them coming up as well. But just from the squad announcement, what excites you or intrigues you about the Football Ferns? Because obviously Australia, they're going to start as big favorites. So it's just like you check the squad and what perks up your antenna as like, oh, that might be helpful against Australia.
I think the fact that it's in Australia is probably a good thing. I think it's a better way to integrate players like Hannah Wilkinson and a few of them others who have been playing A-League than, for example, because Hannah Wilkinson is a player that's maybe the most important could go this way, could go that way kind of player for this team, because she's the best striker that they have in a team that struggles to score goals. She's been playing for a Melbourne City team that plays has been playing in a style not too dissimilar to what Yika Komplova is trying to get the Ferns to do. But Wilkinson probably would admit herself wasn't at her best in the She Believes Cup, wasn't as effective, certainly not as effective as she was for Melbourne City, where she was scoring almost every game. And yeah, I think you maybe just had to sort of pump the brakes there a little bit and say, like, it was her first tour with the new coach, and others had been on 3 tours at that point. Like, some of these A-League players just haven't been available to play. And when I say A-League players, it's the same thing with the Football Ferns as it is with the All Whites. You're not relying on your A-League players to beat the best teams in the world. Like, that's just not where it's at. There are better players in better leagues. However, as I keep saying, like the A-League women's in particular, and you can say it about the men's team too, because you only have to look at Sarpreet Singh and Libby Kikache to see how that goes. The A-League women's competition is a massive stepping stone type of comp, especially like so many of the best Australian players. Like, they came up playing that league. They're now playing for teams like Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea, Lyon. Like, it's pretty emphatic there. And I don't think players like Hannah Wilkinson and Claudia Bunch are going to be hanging around for 2, 3, 4 years of A-League stuff. I think they're probably getting plenty of calls as it is. So they will be important players for the Football Ferns going forward, and this is a nice way to integrate them in playing in Australia. Ideally, it wouldn't have to be against Australia, because Australia is a team we haven't beaten since 1994, as I found out doing some research here. Long time between drinks, but the conditions will be a little nicer. I mean, someone like, because I don't know if you saw the clips of Erin Naylor's game on the weekend, her first Swedish league game. She's played some cup games, but her first league game for a new club in Sweden, Umeå. This is a northern Swedish team coming out of winter. You can imagine how that went. Like, it was just like torrential snowfall. They should not have been playing football. It started off okay, but it got bad enough that they really should have abandoned the game. Check out Flying Kiwis, anyone who wants to see like the extent of that. But I think she's going to enjoy a trip to Townsville. I think even Canberra is going to be pretty tropical for her, considering what she's been playing in recently. So situations like that as well, getting away from the European winter. So it's not a drastically different squad or anything like that. It's very similar. A couple of different players in some of the recent tours, but nothing, dramatic or anything like that. Just another good example, more than anything, of the Ferns cramming in as many games as they can get, as many opportunities to get the squad together, and just hoping that, the more time you have together, the faster you can accelerate this development of this team under the new coach. And that's what we got to look forward to. I do have an interesting stat about Football Ferns versus Australia, because these games will be the 14th and the 15th time that the Ferns have played against the Matildas since the start of 2010. As I say, Ferns haven't won since 94 against Australia, so they've won like none of those. Of the 13 that have been played, I think they've drawn 2 and lost all the other ones. But more recently, they haven't lost by more than 2 goals for about 7 or 8 years against Australia. They played them at the Olympics most recently, lost 2-1. Gabby Rennie scored a goal off the bench on debut. However, compare that to the All Whites versus the Socceroos. The women's teams will have played 15 times since 2010 by the end of next week after next. The All Whites and Socceroos have played twice in that time. 2 games, one just before the 2010 World Cup, which was a shambles of a game, which I remember writing about in an email not that long ago, because it was Winston Reid's international debut. And Australia should have had 2 red cards in the first half, and All Whites were 1-0 up. Leo Bertos nearly got murdered in that game. It was like genuinely shameful. Some of the tackles he was on the wrong end of, and no red cards popped out because it's a friendly game and referees were just letting it flow, and Australia ended up winning in the 90th minute through a Brett Holman goal. So it was that game just before the 2010 World Cup, a sort of friendly game leading into that tournament for both teams. Actually, they were both there. And then they played again in 2011, and I think Australia won 3-0, a more routine victory there. Haven't played since. So the All Whites and Socceroos have not played since 2011. It's 11 years and counting. Whereas the women's teams, who are co-hosting a World Cup next year, will have played 15 times in the space of time that the All Whites and Socceroos have played twice. So interesting stat just to ponder on that one. There is some Anzac spirit with the football stuff, but it seems to mostly be confined to the women's football.
The Wellington Phoenix had a good win yesterday as well, 3-0 over Brisbane, I think, and they are now 4th in the A-League, which I don't think the Warriors are going to get up to 4th. The Breakers certainly won't be getting up to 4th, and that is to say, the Wellington Phoenix, maybe the best performing team from Aotearoa in Australia during these pandemic times. So congratulations to them. What an honour. Beating out the Breakers and the cursed Warriors. Big it up to the Wellington Phoenix blokes. And considering the Warriors have lost their women's team due to the pandemic, the Breakers don't bother in women's basketball. The Phoenix are the bastions of Aotearoa sport competing in Australia. They had a nice women's team run, grabbed a win, and
two of them.
And now the Wellington Phoenix blokes are 4th. Their next game is against Manchester City / Melbourne City on Saturday. Melbourne City just happen to be first by the looks of it. They've got 11 wins, 4 draws, and 3 losses. Wellington Phoenix have 8 wins, 3 draws, and 6 losses. So twice as many losses for the Phoenix as Melbourne City. Hard and fast here, wildcard. What is exciting you about the Wellington Phoenix right now? Because we've talked a bit about the loss of Alex Rufer. We talked a bit about the loss of Clayton Lewis. So what is exciting you about the Wellington Phoenix, given that context of losing 2 of the starting midfielders from your first 11? Obviously, there's a bit of All Whites in and out happening as well. So that it's not like smooth sailing. It's a bit niggly. You got players coming in and out, and you're trying to win games as well. So what excites you about the Wellington Phoenix right now?
Well, dare I use that word again, but how about the depth, that win against Brisbane.
Diggity depth.
The diggity depth, 3-0 against Brisbane, who that's consecutive wins for them after they got a 97th minute winner over Perth Glory. These are 2 fortunate games. Like Perth Glory sacked their manager not so long ago. They were last place as the Phoenix came up against them. Brisbane Roar are pretty badly out of form. Quite a young team, it looked like, especially in attack, where you want to talk about a wasteful team. There you go. They had like 36 shots or something ridiculous in that game, and not too many of them were that threatening, but they did ramp it up as the game went on, and Ollie Sale ended up delivering one of the best goalkeeping performances you will ever see. Like, it was unbelievable. He made about 11 saves. Some of them were just unreal. It was just like, at some point, if you're like the Brisbane Roar striker in that game, you just got to sit back and be like, well, we might as well just go home after 70 minutes. We're not going to score against this guy. Like, even the consolation goal, like the last kick of the game, there was a bad clearance from, I think, Jackson Manuel, one of the young guys coming on to fill out some of that depth. Misses his clearance, falls to a striker, looks like an open goal. Sale just out of nowhere slides in and blocks it on the line. Like, they were 3-0 up with seconds to go at that point. It's pretty much the last act of the game. It's just like, nah, you're not beating me today. It's just not happening. Like a magnet. He was unbelievable. Makes an very interesting scenario, given he's just played his first couple games for the All Whites under Danny Hayes, first couple games for the All Whites, full stop. But, Danny Hayes just had a good look at him. Both him and Stefan Marinovic played 2 games out of 5 at this 2 games each out of 5 at this Oceania tournament. So interesting debate coming forward whether Sale might be challenging Marinovic for the starters gloves. He's absolutely done enough to say he should be in any squad. But yeah, Brisbane were wasteful. So these were two games that were kind of fortunate for the Phoenix at this point in time because their depth is being tested, and they got smoked 4-0 by Newcastle a while back when they had about 8 players out. A lot of key players too missing at that time. So we've seen like it'll catch you up against a good team. So they really did need to put some goals away, put some points away against 2 favorable opposition like matchups at this time of their season. And they did. Like they got that late win against Perth last week, and then 3-0 over Brisbane is a fantastic result in a game which statistically looked like it should have gone the complete opposite direction. However, Phoenix were clinical. Phoenix were in control. A lot of those shots weren't as effective as they look like. Brisbane's finishing was poor, and they didn't really threaten as much. So the stats don't tell the full story, but like it tells some of it. And that's a good win from the Phoenix to win 3-0 when the XG pretty much said the opposite of that. And you got a goal from Ben Wayne, you got a goal from Ben Old as well. So like a couple of guys who made their, and then Ollie Sale, like those 3 guys made their All Whites debuts in the same game at the first game against Papua New Guinea earlier on, first game of that tournament. Come back and are playing, starring performances for the Phoenix. Like when I talk about depth, I'll say they had, Rufer and Lewis, obviously both the 2 starting midfielders, both missing from this game. No Josh Soterio, no Gary Hooper, no Ren Episcopo played about 20 minutes off the bench, but it was his first game for a month, so he's coming back. He wasn't in the starting team. No Josh Laws, no Tim Payne, who's away on international duty. No Oscar Van Haddam, who would have been a handy attacking bench option as well. No Ufuk Talay, still out of the team at the moment with COVID. So these 2 games, these 2 very important games to get these important points on the board, take it like Giancarlo Italiano, the assistant coach, is having to take over and guiding them to victories. So I just think as far as that go, yes, they were games that the Phoenix should have won, and they against Perth they probably should have won a lot more comfortably than they did. They played against 10 men for a lot of that game and took a 97th minute winner to get the go, but I mean, it doesn't matter how you win them when your depth is being tested that much. It's just a matter of whether you win them. And it will be a lot tougher against Colonial Man City next up. That's a much harder game. But that's exactly why they needed to get 6 points out of 6 from these to keep their finals chances, steaming ahead. And they did that. And that is hugely encouraging, especially when you look at some of the players who are stepping up. And it is those fresh internationals, the 2 Bens and Ollie Sale, delivering the goods when the team needed it. The types of players who you need to step up in that scenario, they did exactly that. I thought Sam Sutton had a really good game at centre mid as well. Did get a little bit tired towards the end, so there is that aspect. But up until that point, as they were establishing their lead, I thought he was fantastic. So plenty to work with there, and plenty to be excited about as they start bringing back some of these injured players. Piscopo's back now. Soterio shouldn't be too much longer, 1 or 2 more games. Hopefully Josh Laws is back by the next game. Some of those guys, that's exciting. They've shown that they can handle some of these injuries, handle some of their depth being tested. Some, not all, but still some is enough to keep them in, and keep them swimming, keep them afloat in that finals battle. So I think it's hugely exciting from the Phoenix. And yeah, hopefully they can sneak some points with some of the better teams while they're still down on numbers as well. That would be nice. That'd be very handy.
Very handy indeed. Let's swing over to rugby league, and we got finals footy in the NRL women's competition, aka NRLWahine, and we got Dragons, Titans, Roosters, and Broncos. So that means the Newcastle Knights and the Parramatta Eels didn't make the finals footy. Parramatta Eels have had Josephine Daniels. She is a Manurewa Marlins junior. She was played a couple of games at centre and then fell out of the top 17 for the last few games, I think. But she's a good Kiwi Ferns centre prospect coming up. And they also had Nita Maynard, Kiwi Ferns hooking veteran, in their team as well. Newcastle Knights, as we know, half, if not most of their team is from Aotearoa. And Aneta Nuasala won both the Knights Player of the Year and the Knights Players Player of the Year award as well. She's from Mangere and Otara, leader of the Kiwi NRL Wahine crew at the Newcastle Knights. So big it up to them. Unfortunately for the Knights, they weren't super competitive throughout the competition. But there was ample opportunity for the ladies from Aotearoa. They got a good taste of NRLW footy, which is, we've got the New Zealand Rugby League women's competition happening right now as well, which is really solid. But if the Kiwi Ferns are going to compete against Australia, well, all the Aussie players are playing NRLW. So we want as many Kiwis playing NRLW as possible. And then you bolster the depth back in Aotearoa. The first game is Dragons versus Titans. Dragons have Madison Bartlett on the wing. She is a Kiwi Ferns veteran type of player as well. And her centre is Paige McGregor, funnily enough, wildcard, born and raised in Australia, but wants to join her older sister, Racine McGregor, half for the Roosters in representing Aotearoa. So I've learned about Paige McGregor. And she is part of the Kiwi NRLWahine crew. But again, born and raised in Australia, so it makes no sense. The Titans are a low-key, funky team. Brittany Brayley-Nati in the halves, or Kimiora Brayley-Nati, sorry, in the halves. Tiana Rathstrand-Smith is another curious eligibility case. She's from Auckland, and she started NRLW at centre, but has now moved into edge forward. She is an absolute beast. She runs very hard. She is very physical, and she bullies opponents, which I like to see. And Georgia Hale didn't play last week, but she's back on the bench. Georgia Hale is maybe one of the classiest NRLW players. Doesn't miss a tackle. Always takes a hit up. Good passing skills. Good footy skills. And another curious eligibility case is Destiny Brill, who is from Aotearoa, but I think she has already played like rugby for Queensland. She might have played rugby league for Queensland as well. So Destiny Brill and Tiana Rathstrand-Smith are players to watch, especially as we get into Kiwi Ferns footy, because I think they are both international caliber rugby league players. Not sure if they're going to be eligible for Aotearoa, just because on the women's side of things, there's far more opportunities in Australia. So a lot of these young wahine are moving to Australia, and then they get caught up in the Australian system where you're playing for New South Wales, you're playing for Queensland, and it all gets a bit exciting. So curious to see what happens there. Remember, we do have a World Cup looming at the end of this year. If the Kiwi NRL perspective, we want to go for the Titans. Shout out to Madison Bartlett, very good with the Dragons. Dragons coached by Jamie Soward, right up there with the Brisbane Broncos as the best teams of the campaign so far. And the Broncos face the Roosters. And the Broncos have one of the most dynamic forwards in the competition, Amber Hall, who just racks up offloads, post-contact meters, run meters, and absolutely steamrolls her way through opponent defensive lines. Lavinia Gould represented Aotearoa in Sevens rugby as well, and I think she's got a Kiwi Ferns cap. And learning more about women's rugby league, I've Googled a few names, and there was like, for some reason, there were a couple of wahine. Lavinia Gould got shafted out of the Sevens rugby program because of a failed drug test. And I just chuckled because I remembered that some other players that I Googled from the wider Kiwi NRL, the like women's rugby league landscape had as well, which is a weird, like, might have been one of those, like, just taking some pre-workout supplements and you don't read what's on the bottle. Or just a bit of weed, and you know what we're like with a bit of weed. You fail your drug test and your career's over. Sydney Roosters, they do have Racine McGregor in the halves and Leanne Tufunga on the wing, as well as Maya Hill Moana up the guts, starting prop. So basically, we're looking at Broncos and Dragons as the favourites. Both teams have 2 Kiwi NRLWahine in their squads. Roosters and Titans have a bit more Kiwi NRL funk, but haven't been as good as the Broncos and the Dragons throughout the campaign. So I'll write about all that on Saturday morning. Both these games are going down on Sunday afternoon, Aotearoa time.
There we go. Who would you say has been like from the Kiwi players in the NRLW? Who would you say have been like the standouts, like the MVPs so far?
Hall, Amber Hall was definitely up there. Well, Netta Nu'usala, she won the best player for the night, so that's admirable as well.
It helps, yeah.
Hall is definitely the most dominant, I'd say that. Everyone else kind of just does their role. Like Madison Bartlett's on the wing. She just does her role nicely. Georgia Hale, super classy, but she's someone who covers a wide range of positions and does what the team needs to do as well. So also important here, I think Tuila Fotumawala was playing for Counties Manukau in the New Zealand Rugby League Women's Premiership. And so there are Kiwi Fern caliber players currently playing in the local domestic competition as well. So that's really important for local fans. You can see Kiwi Fern caliber players in Aotearoa every weekend as well. Because some of those players like Tuila Fotumawala has been previously a dominant force in NRLW, but now she's in Aotearoa. So overall, I think maybe the Kiwi NRLWahine crew lacks a bit of star power dominance, but all the best players are playing their role within their team, and the other players just a bit younger, adjusting to NRLW footy, which is what happened a lot with the Knights. Another player for the Knights is Shante Poko, who is one of the rare footy players who can play halfback. She can play middle forward, and when she's playing middle forward, she's playing halfback. So she'll be like starting lock, and then she does all the kicking. She's throwing like 20-meter cutout passes either way. She's doing the goal kicking, like whatever the fuck. Shante Poko from Canterbury is, I'll say she might be the best natural female footy player in Aotearoa. Maybe even Eva Code, just with what she does, like super skillful and has the size and rugged nature to play in the forwards as well. It's a pretty crazy.
Yeah,
Warriors.
Sounds like Nikola Jokic there. It's like playing center and then doing point guard passes, like, you know.
That's probably the best comparison, I'd say. A little bit of touch, a little bit of pizzazz, panache, you know, with the size. Warriors versus Broncos. I wrote about this morning, and I had to include the bit about this being a home game for the Warriors, but it's in Brisbane. Like, yeah. I think a lot of people, because like Redcliffe has this NRL team, and the game is at Redcliffe, and just the way Redcliffe is throwing up, I don't know if people like actually realize that Redcliffe is just like on the extremities of Brisbane. It's pretty much in Brisbane. Now, don't get me started down this route, Wildcard, because we know about Tauranga and Mount Maunganui and Bay Oval and that kind of shit. So I just think like Redcliffe, it's in fucking Brisbane. Like, let's be honest here. And some of the Brisbane players...
Phoenix played there. Phoenix played at Redcliffe against Brisbane Roar in a Brisbane Roar home game last night. So there you go.
So the Brisbane Roar played their home game at Redcliffe, and now the Warriors' home game against Brisbane Broncos is at Redcliffe. Yeah. That's fucking weird.
Which was a disaster too, so keep that in mind. It was like waterlogged and shocking. So.
Many of the Brisbane players might live closer to Redcliffe, because Suncorp Stadium's like smack bang in the city of Brisbane. Yeah. And so if they live on the north side of Brisbane, they're living closer to Redcliffe. I did check Google Maps. It's less than 40 kilometers between Suncorp Stadium and Moreton Daily Stadium in Redcliffe. So all of which is to say, especially for the Warriors, Phoenix and Breakers, I think I'm still of the opinion, like, hope for the best, and for the Warriors specifically, low expectations. But what's if we just reserve some judgment until there's actually a home advantage? Because the Warriors, and of course the Phoenix, and of course the Breakers, there is no home advantage. And when you're playing a professional sports competition, so much depends on home and away. whether you're away for football, it might determine if you go for a draw, if you push for a victory. Like where the game is played plays into how you play the game. The Warriors do not have a home advantage anywhere in Australia. They might throw it up and put a little, like some of the Polynesian drums in the background to make it feel, but like there's Polynesians in Australia, like there's Māoris in Australia, you know, like it's not specific to Aotearoa. And the more I think deeply about this, we've thought about connection to fans and those type of ideas. I think there's a tangible benefit for the Warriors, because you get to Mount Smart and they've got that massive gym, they've got all this cool artwork on the wall, all the history of the Warriors is there because that's been their home since 1995 or whatever. And I think that has a tangible benefit for the club. And I think everyone, whether you're from Aotearoa, you're from Australia, whether you are a Warriors fan or you're not a Warriors fan, before even thinking about the Warriors, before even talking shit about the Warriors or good stuff, remember there is no home game. Like, and I think this is the most prevalent idea this week because they're playing a home game against Brisbane in Brisbane. Like there is no home advantage. Their home game is in Brisbane against Brisbane. That's ridiculous. And with that in mind, it would be pretty funny if Brisbane lost because they lost to the Cowboys at Suncorp Stadium last week. And the way they lost, there was no like get up for the game. Like, oh, I respect the Queensland Derby. And I respect how they frame the Queensland Derby as like an exciting matchup. All these previous games were really exciting, and well, Brisbane Broncos don't care because they didn't show up against the Cowboys. Like various Brisbane Broncos players weren't on the field despite being on the field, and they just like gave the whole game to the Cowboys. And it was very strange, which could go either way against the Warriors because they could either be like, yo, fuck that, now we need to get back on the ship. Everyone fires on all cylinders. They'll probably understand it is a home game for the Broncos. So it'll be like, okay, we're just going up to Redcliffe. Feels local, all that shit. Alternatively, there is like a compounding a lol, laugh out loud, that could happen if the Brisbane Broncos don't show up against the Cowboys in their biggest matchup, apparently, at Suncorp Stadium, and then they drive up the road for another home game and they lose to the Warriors. That would be quite funny. Just quickly on the Broncos, because if you can humor me here, Wildcard, and if I'm allowed to continue my niggle towards the Broncos.
Please do. I enjoy it.
So respect to the Broncos' young Kiwi NRL forwards. Jordan Ricky went off the field injured last week, but he's still named on the edge this week. And they have TC Robati, one of the most low-key Kiwi NRL juniors in the NRL. He's a Porirua Vikings junior, made his debut last year. Very hard-running, robust forward. From a Kiwi NRL perspective, nothing to do with the Broncos, just a Kiwi NRL perspective. If the Broncos suck, it's going to be good. Because there's Xavier Willison is coming back. He is a massive dude. And if there are players in this Broncos team who aren't doing the right job and they are losing games, these Kiwi NRL juniors at the Broncos are going to get more opportunities, more game time, more chances to impress. And if that means more game time for Robati, fantastic. If that means more game time for Willison, even better. And when I think about, like, what do we know about salary cap management and young players wildcard? We know there is value in young players. So if I'm thinking, okay, the Broncos are paying X amount for Katoni Staggs, and then there's also this other dude, Dean Mariner, who is on an entry-level NRL contract, or if you got Herbie Farnworth even, he's apparently in demand. So if the Broncos don't see the right value as far as money for performance with Stags or Farnworth, there's better value for money, perhaps, in Dean Mariner. And this falls into my wider narrative of a lot of NRL coaches will start the season rather conservative. Cowboys didn't start with Griffin Niami in their team. And then some things happen. And suddenly Griffin Niami is one of the best bench forwards for the Cowboys. Similar thing here with the Broncos. If they struggle, they also happen to have one of the best groups of Kiwi NRL youngsters in the NRL. They also have the Fa'atili twins, not twins, brothers from Christchurch, Felix and Kaius, who are both playing for Wynnum under 18s and under 21s. One plays the old age group, the other plays the younger age group. They have other juniors as well, but the Broncos have been very specific in targeting high quality Kiwi NRL juniors. They are all there, part of their system, and right now it's the Aussie juniors getting the game time, or the veteran Australians, the more established Aussies getting the game time. So not only would it be funny if the Warriors defeated the Brisbane Broncos in Brisbane, if that wave increases and continues to roll, we might see greater alignment with Kiwi NRL talent as well. Willison's more injury recovery, but I can see at some point the Brisbane Broncos will look to offload more expensive outside backs because they know they have Dean Mariner. They might even be comfortable unloading forwards who want more money because Jordan Ricky, TC Robati, and Xavier Willison are, high quality Kiwi NRL forwards. And we don't have a shortage of Kiwi NRL forwards like Hamlin Uele, Fisher Harris, Joseph Tapani, Asafa Solomona, Brandon Smith. Those dudes are all really fucking good. And the Broncos have three more who could move into that bracket at some point as well.
I'm just because I was watching that Phoenix game last night, and I knew that this is the ground where the Warriors play their game. This is where the Warriors are based. This is the ground, old Moreton Daily Stadium, whatever. I guess Moreton Daily is a newspaper or something. I don't know. I knew that much. Hadn't thought about the fact that the Warriors are playing there against the Brisbane Broncos not even 3 days later, but not even 72 hours later, because it's an afternoon kickoff versus a night kickoff on Wednesday night. So Wednesday night to Saturday afternoon. Phoenix it's just weird as that the Phoenix were away against a Brisbane team and the Warriors are home against a Brisbane team, and it's at the exact same ground. Two different sports, 2.5 days apart. That's just nuts to think about. What a weird alignment that is, but also in keeping with your if the Broncos lose, and that's good for the Kiwi stakes. Also, be pretty amazing for Kiwi wider sporting stakes if the Phoenix and the Warriors get consecutive victories within 3 days of each other on the exact same pitch. That would, both against Brisbane teams as well. That would be kind of amazing. That would be something that would be. I don't know how much that's going to get mentioned. I suspect that it won't be talked about at all on the Fox Sports NRL feed, that there was an A-League game there a little bit earlier, especially because Fox Sports no longer cover the A-League, and once upon a time they did. But at least we know, at least we've chucked a flag in the ground and said, "Hey, look, check out this weird occurrence that might happen."
If that happens,
who wins in the? Oh man!
If that happens, it's leading my Monday email. It's leading my Tuesday variety show podcast. It's front and center, because that is an exceptional little bit. As far as the Warriors go, coming up against the Broncos, Sean Johnson might return, and the thing I keep coming back to is the forward pack wildcard, because Jason Taumalolo, I don't like to simplify it, but I do think, and I did have a little thought exercise. You think about Super Rugby. Each forward pack has a dude that leads the forward pack. For the Blues, the first name that comes to mind right now is Hoskins Sotutu. Like, I don't know if that's legit viable. Also, was thinking, like, how many minutes of rugby union has Roger Tuivasa-Sheck played since leaving the Warriors? Something to keep an eye on. The Chiefs, right? It's the Chiefs. It's Brodie Retallick. It's Sam Cane. Hurricanes, Artie Savia. Just straight up Artie Savia. Crusaders, might have been Kieran Reid in the past. Before that, might have been Richie McCaw. Now it's old Whitelock, Sam Whitelock. Highlanders, don't have anyone that comes to mind. And that might be an issue for the Highlanders. I don't know. But I think about, like, there's always one dude. This was on display against Cowboys and Broncos. And you can go around the NRL and find these type of situations. Jason Taumalolo versus Payne Haas. But it's more than that. It's Jason Taumalolo and his group of Cowboys forwards versus Payne Haas and his group of Broncos forwards. For the Warriors, it's Adam Fanua-Blake. It's Adam Fanua-Blake and the Warriors forward pack up against Payne Haas and the Broncos forward pack. When framed like that, it's tricky for the Warriors because I don't think you're going to see Payne Haas and the Brisbane forward pack serve up losing performances 2 weeks in a row. I think there's a lot of discussion around Payne Haas and his value, his financial value, which coming off a loss against your rival apparently might spark them into ruthless action against the Warriors. But the general idea of Adam Fanua-Blake leading this Warriors forward pack against the Broncos, I like it. And in my Warriors diary this morning, I shared that they all have good tackling numbers, but there was a mishap from Matt Lodge, like a little misread in defense. And I think that is an area of weakness for the Warriors. Like, if you have the right structure, the right plays, and the right mindset against the Warriors, you can definitely tear them apart around the ruck area, and you can expose them defensively beyond making or missing tackles. At the same time, who in that Broncos forward pack is going to stop Fanua-Blake? Because Fanua-Blake is still one of the best forwards in the NRL. And when you get into like the types of forwards in this Warriors forward pack, Bailey Sirenen was literally doing nothing and he's dropped out of the team, replaced by Jack Murchie, big body, whatever. But dudes like Aaron Penne, Bunty Afoa, Jazz Tavanga bouncing around in a similar fashion as Josh Curran. Matt Lodge is pretty good, like easy to hate and dislike, but he is also very good at his job. And I just like this Warriors forward pack around Fanua-Blake. And I really like Fanua-Blake. This dude just churns through meters and he breaks the line and he's got footwork and he gets quick play the balls. And I think I'm just eager to see that matchup. Taumalolo and the Cowboys versus Payne Haas and the Broncos. Now I'm eager to see Fanua-Blake and the Warriors versus Payne Haas and the Broncos, especially if you then insert Sean Johnson, because we haven't seen the Sean Johnson we talked about prior to the season. Like, we didn't see Sean Johnson control that first game against the Dragons. And like, all we want to see is Sean Johnson kicking long, finding open turf, throwing the right passes at the right times, getting the right blokes, the right footy at the right times, all that stuff, combining with Harris Tavita, combining with Reece Walsh, and just keeping things as simple as possible. If you got a forward pack led by Fanua-Blake and you've got Sean Johnson controlling a game of footy, I think that's a decent recipe for success against equally mediocre NRL teams such as the Broncos, such as the Tigers, definitely the Dragons as well.
Except they lost to the Dragons, so there you go. I did think Sean Johnson kicked really well in that game, in the first half in particular. lost a bit of that control in the second half, and that's probably why the game started to get away from them. Not that that was a symptom rather than the cause. Right, I'm not saying Sean Johnson was the issue. I'm just saying that the game got away from them, and therefore Sean Johnson's control was less evident, sort of thing. But I also think it's probably fair to say you've seen a team that hasn't had a lot of control with the ball in hand, in particular, without him. Right, so if he is like, he's on the extended bench, isn't he? I suppose as well. Come to think of it, if he came in, he'd probably come in for Nikorima. Would that be right? Could wear the 7 jersey? Not necessarily, but if he did, that would mean Johnson and Chanel Harris-Tavita in halves combo, which would, I think, be a 4th unique starting pairing in 4 games, wouldn't it? Still on for that for that streak. Keep that one alive.
Yeah, that illustrious honor that is highly conducive to winning rugby league games at the highest level. From what I've seen and what the stats say, I think it's Sean Johnson in for Cody Nikorima, just because Cody Nikorima at halfback hasn't been playing how we all think Cody Nikorima should be playing. And that is an area of criticism towards Nikorima, because we just want to see him like darting around, getting on the front foot, and then setting other blokes up with his speed and agility and his skill. But I think what you've seen from Cody Nikorima in Sean Johnson's absence is him playing like Sean Johnson. And yeah, of course, like, because the round 1 thing was like Sean Johnson, Nikorima, the Kiwis halves, they know each other, like blah, blah, blah. Nikorima, the funky footy player, Sean Johnson controlling things at halfback, all that shit. Whereas now I think it's an easier, just slot Sean Johnson in for Nikorima, because Nikorima hasn't been doing Nikorima things. He hasn't been commanding selection with his spark and his X factor. He has been more like trying to control a game of footy. And I still think Johnson, Harris-Tavita, Reece Walsh is the best playmaking trio. And I simply prefer having Jazz Tavanga on the bench than Cody Nikorima. Like, I don't even think you need cover for injury and concussion and all that stuff that a smart coach needs to have. But Jazz Tavanga doesn't need to play dummy half. I think Jazz Tavanga's X factor as a footy player is as a middle forward, where he just rips in, goes nuts. That's what you want. Especially when you're doing that alongside, in conjunction with Josh Curran, Matt Lodge, Fanua Blake, and those dudes. So I suspect it would be Sean Johnson in for Cody Nikorima. But of course, Johnson and Nikorima isn't terrible, because then you hope that Nikorima can be funky alongside Johnson's more basic mahi. There is under 21s footy as well for Redcliffe. So now we have Mal Meninga Cup, which is under 18s. We've got Hastings Daring Colts, which is under 21, and reserve grade, which means all 3 Redcliffe Dolphins teams are in action. And the under 21s team starts with Ali Leatawa starting at center, and Zion Mai'uu starting as an edge forward. Both of them are from Auckland. Both of them were playing first 15 rugby last year. Mai'uu for Kelston Boys High School, Leatawa for King's College. And they also have very illustrious rugby league backgrounds. Kinakepu is named on an extended bench for under 21s, while also being part of the reserve grade squad. So him being on the extended bench for under 21s isn't like you're not good enough for under 21s. It's just more of a case of you're probably going to play reserve grade, but you might cover under 21s as well. Under 18s for Redcliffe Dolphins, we've got an update, because we got Zephaniah Cowley-Lupo starting at fullback, as well as Jacob Laban at prop. No Tamakai Moana Whare Aurere this week. Cowley-Lupo is from St. Paul's College in Auckland and played a bit of cricket for St. Paul's College as well. So he is now starting fullback for the Redcliffe Dolphins under 18 team. And in reserve grade, stock standard really, Junior Ratuva and Edward Kosi on the wings, PC Kepo starting middle forward, and Taniela Otukulo with Kina Kepu coming off the bench. So starting to see more of these Warriors juniors from Aotearoa filtering through the Redcliffe Dolphins. This week, yes, every Redcliffe Dolphins team, all three of them, has 2 Warriors in it. Under 18, under 21, and reserve grade, each of those teams has 2 Warriors juniors from Aotearoa, as well as reserve grade. Obviously, you've got Pride, Pedersen, Robati, those type of dudes from the NRL squad. But yeah, Redcliffe Dolphins, 3 teams with at least 2 Warriors juniors in each team is something. Might be cool. Some of these teams are losing. Some of these teams are winning. Don't really care about the results. I'm just tracking who's in there and who's not.
And if there's multiple dudes in each of them, then that seems like a positive thing. To swing it back to some of the stuff we started with, talking about depth and expanding the pool and whatever. And I'd imagine the Warriors are likely to have to dip into some of that depth at some point throughout the course of the season. It's something that is going to be unavoidable. So it is handy in the absence of having like their own proper, reserve grade team, as everybody else I'm assuming has. I'm guessing that it's another one of those scenarios where the Warriors are unique in that. I don't know though. Is that true? Or would they be the only team that doesn't have like an active reserve grade team and has to share one?
Adios.
Yeah, right.
There's no other Warriors team apart from NRL.
And every other NRL team has got themselves reserve grade affiliates and whatever to fill in as many players, right? Like that's the Warriors are the only ones like scrapping in this way.
So most, if not all, NRL clubs will have affiliated teams from reserve grade, under 21s, under 18s, and then, well, like New South Wales is under 19s, then under 17s, I think. In Queensland, it's under 18, under 21, but there's something below under 18s, I'd imagine, as well. So, yes, all those other NRL clubs have at least 4 teams below the NRL level. And then many NRL clubs have 2 different feeder clubs. So like the Melbourne Storm have Brisbane Tigers, I think, and Sunshine Coast Falcons. Brisbane Broncos have North Devils, Wynnum, and South Slogan. Gold Coast Titans have Tweed and Burleigh. North Queensland Cowboys have Townsville, Northern Pride, and there might be another team, Mackay. In New South Wales, it's all a bit more simple because you just go like Bulldogs and then Bulldogs reserve grade. Manly Seagulls are associated with Blacktown, so they just have a Blacktown feeder club. So I think in Sydney, it's pretty much just 1 for 1, like 1 reserve grade team for 1 NRL team. But up in Queensland, the 3 Queensland clubs, each of them has at least 2 reserve grade teams. And I think before the Warriors joined with Redcliffe Dolphins, Redcliffe were part of the Broncos set up as well. So all that's happening, and the Warriors have nothing. They just put some dudes in another team, and there's no home games for the Warriors. They did have an SG Ball team, as I've written about before. They have had Jersey Flegg teams. All those teams are gone. But, you keep on trucking. Soldier on. Soldier on. Blah, blah.
Yeah. Combined with the lack of home games. I mean, there was actually, since you mentioned that, I just reminded of a bit in the commentary on the Phoenix game where the color commentator says he rolls out some stat about like Phoenix home and versus away performance or something like that. Like they hadn't won an away game for 4 games or something, some dumb thing like that. And then the other commentator was just like, nah, man, I'm not having that. And the other guy was like, what do you mean? I did all this research. I was trying to come up. You're normally the stat guy, and here I am trying to come up with a good stat, and you don't even want to accept it. And he's like, well, I just don't think the Phoenix have any home games. And I'm thinking, hey, there we go. Someone recognizes it. Like they have away games and they have neutral games. They don't have home games. They do have two coming up. There's one at Eden Park and there's one at Sky Stadium. But they haven't played them yet. And up to this point, it's been entirely. I mean, the Phoenix actually had a game a while back, which they had to play. They had to voluntarily play it behind closed doors because they couldn't afford to do the like match day costs and stuff like that because it was a quick rearrangement of a game that had been postponed during all the weather stuff. They played it a couple of days later, and they're like, well, we can't rearrange things so quickly. Like we can't afford to do that. So we're just going to have to play with no fans in the stand. Like they've actually had to do that throughout the season. That was a home game. And they had to forfeit the possibility of any fans, which normally is only a couple hundred for them playing over in Aussie. Like that's not an insignificant thing. And it adds to what the Phoenix are achieving, that they're currently sitting fourth place going through they haven't had a home game yet. And they're sitting in fourth place with games in hand on other teams on the table. Like pretty nuts. Maybe the Warriors will be in that position a bit deeper into the season because, the Phoenix had to come through some slippery times early on. Don't think we'll see the Breakers getting up anywhere. They won't even get to fourth to last, let alone fourth. But I do think, they haven't finished fourth. Fourth is the finals place. They haven't made the finals since the new ownership came in. But I do think they wouldn't be last if they had a bunch of home games to play. Like even as critical as you can be about the Breakers in many areas, and a lot of it has got absolutely nothing to do with pandemic-y stuff. Like it's not, there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds that these sympathies don't apply to. And that needs to be separated as well and, deserves to be critiqued. But that seems good enough to have won at least a few more games had they been able to play in front of home crowds. Like that's not a stretch to say that, I don't believe. So the Warriors, though, potentially will get more home games than any of those other teams just because starting later, I'm assuming. I'm not sure what the scenario is there, but they're hoping for at least a couple, aren't they? So that will be a spectacle. Like it's going to be a spectacle when the Phoenix get a couple games like that, especially if they keep up some form. That's going to be massive crowds. The Warriors can play at Mount Smart. They're just going to sell it out instantly. Like that's going to be huge. That's quite a exciting thing to look forward to. We'll see where the Warriors are actually out on the table compared to the Phoenix. Because like I say, Phoenix are probably going to be bringing in some decent form and momentum into that. Don't know about the Warriors. But I think there were a lot of positives from last week. I thought they defended quite well for one thing, admittedly against the Tigers, but there was a spell when they had a guy in the sin bin and they plugged in nicely. So you've mentioned the Ford pack. There's a lot of goodness to think the Warriors can get a little bit of momentum at some point, and this is maybe a winnable game. Maybe. We'll see.
The Warriors are 0-1 at home, 1-1 away. From
home with an asterisk.
They're 1-1 away from their home fortress of Brisbane. Panthers are 2-0 at home. Raiders are 2-0 at home. Rabbitohs and Titans have their only win in home stadiums. And there's the Warriors, just like the Phoenix, just like the Breakers, battling on without a home ground, without any home advantage. But the niche cage stays at home. We only exist with home advantage. Because that's how we get the mahi done, we stick with the home advantage, and until things even out for our beloved clubs, we will not venture. In protest, we won't play away games. How about that? We're only playing home games, and we have a severe advantage with home games as well. Obviously, Team New Zealand, they don't care about home advantage or away advantage, but beautiful.
International waters.
Started with Team New Zealand, end with Team New Zealand. That is the niche cast. Big it up to yourself. Big it up to Aotearoa. Love yourself. Love Aotearoa. And we'll be back Monday with the Patreon podcast, Tuesday with the variety show, as well as plenty of sporting yarns on the niche-case.com over the weekend as well. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Chir.